I'm Mark Halperin. Welcome to Wide World of News. We're talking about a big aspect of the world dealing with the pandemic, something that everybody's interested in, or most everybody, which is sports. We've seen in the United States a lot of leagues talking about getting back to business and hoping to be back in business by the middle or late summer. But around the world, every organization that schedules sporting events is grappling with how to go forward. One event that is not going forward is the Tokyo Olympics. That is an event that has been delayed now probably for a full year in Tokyo, and it's a great disappointment to the Japanese people and to the athletes, of course, planning to participate. Joining us today to talk about what's happened with the Olympics and the implications for that, Terrence Burns. He's a longtime worker and observer of the Olympics. He's done a variety of things helping countries and the Olympic Committee and athletes and others deal with what is every 4 years, every 2 years, a huge undertaking. Terrence, welcome.
Thank you very much.
What is the precedent historically for Tokyo being delayed a year? Has this happened before?
It has not. These will be the first Olympic Games that have been postponed. As you know, there have been a couple of boycotts through the years, 2 cancellations, I think, maybe 3, but certainly during World War II and 40 and the 44 games were just outright canceled. I would say that those games, 40 and 44, were much less complex, much less expensive. Everything was as like a county fair compared to the Olympic Games today. So this is the first postponement.
The Japanese tried so hard to not cancel them at a time or delay them at a time when lots of people from around the world were saying this is not possible. Some countries said they wouldn't go. The Japanese worked very hard to delay the decision, which they eventually reached. Why do you think the Japanese felt it was important to try to preserve the original dates for the games?
Well, they've been working on it for 7 years. They've probably put conservatively 10, 11, 12 billion dollars into this effort. It was a huge political expenditure of capital by Prime Minister Abe to get the games. And it's, you know, the Olympic Games in places like Japan take on a national significance. It's kind of lost on us Americans, to be honest with you. I've worked all over the world in the Olympics for the last 25, 26, 7 years. And in a country like Japan, it is truly a national effort. The reality is in America, the last games we had was in 2002, Winter Games, Summer Games was Atlanta. And even though I do this and love it for a living, probably the people in Seattle were not very excited about the games in Atlanta. However, in a place like Japan, it takes on magnificent importance. So I think those were really crucial. And I think it's important also to understand that Japan and the IOC are partners in this. Even though the IOC oversees the games on a quadrennial basis, they have a delivery partner, which is the organizing committee, in this case, Tokyo. So before either party could officially agree to postpone, they had to have a solid plan B. And that plan B, as one can imagine, involved a lot of politics, a lot of finance. It involved sports. It involved the IFs, athletes. It's a very, very complicated equation. So I am not one of those people who criticize the IOC on this point, even though sometimes I'm a little pointed on other things they do and say. I think that they struggled on how to do this right, and it may not have been on everyone else's time frame, but it worked for the Olympic movement and it worked for the people of Japan.
So obviously there's disappointment in Japan, and obviously around the world, the Olympics are a great event, and if they had been held, it would have certainly buoyed spirits. What is the cost, though? Financial, human, the Olympic image? What's the cost for just delaying it a year?
That's a good question. I think they're still trying to figure that out, Mark. The IOC, as you know, last week committed $800 million to that effort. The challenges really for the organizing committee in Tokyo are logistical and technical. In other words, the hotel rooms, for example, for 100,000 hotel rooms or more, 7 years in advance, they selected the hotels, they agreed on rates, they agreed on all types, so people basically didn't get ripped off. Right. Those were all blocked. Now they have to quickly figure out what to do. Obviously, those rooms are not going to be filled this summer because no one's traveling very much anyway. So they have to somehow transfer those room blocks a year in advance, and probably the big hotels in Tokyo, the popular ones, have conventions, et cetera, set up for next year. They didn't plan to do this, so that's a big deal. The venues, As you know, there are, or may not know, there are venue use agreements that the organizing committee has to sign with each of these venues. Who's going to pay for what? There's something called Olympic overlay, where you take an existing venue and you make it look Olympic for 17 days, which means really get rid of all the signage, get rid of all the on-screen, there's no commercial signage in an Olympic event. And I think a lot of people don't understand that's a big difference per se than World Cup, which is kind of a commercial orgy, and that's as it should be, and it's fantastic, and we all love the World Cup. The Olympics are a clean venue, so they have to do all of that. The transport plans, security plans, those types of things are fairly transferable, but the hard costs of venues are not. So that's the Tokyo answer. For athletes in the Olympic family, there's a host of issues. Qualifying for the Olympic Games is one of them. When and how is that going to happen? The international federations, as I told you, govern sport on a global basis. When you go to the Olympic Games, Mark, and you watch Olympic competition, it's lost on most people that the International Olympic Committee and the organizing committee have literally nothing to do with what happens on the field of play. That is the international federations. For example, the International Basketball Federation, FIBA, that controls the competition at the Olympic Games. That means it puts the referees in there, the rules, all that stuff. So it's a very, very complicated equation. You touch one little thing and 100 things change. Most of the athletes with whom I've spoken are pretty pragmatic about it. There are a few, obviously, who this would have been their last games, and that's problematic, but it's also life. And I think one of the things I know about athletes is that they're extraordinarily pragmatic. They're very determined. It's what they've been doing all their lives. You could say it's their last shot at glory, but they're pretty pragmatic about it. And the younger ones, frankly, if they could make the games this year, they can make the games next year.
Right. One of the interested parties you didn't mention was Comcast, which is TV rights in the United States. Again, obviously, it's a hit to their balance sheet this year, but they also save a lot of money because covering the games is so expensive. Is there any reason why Comcast would be less happy to have the games next year as opposed to this year?
Well, let's look at next year. Next year, you're also going to be competing somewhat with Euro. The Euro is taking place next year, so there's a battle for hearts and minds and eyeballs that always goes on. And I know the NBC people quite well. I've known them for many years. I don't know exactly how their rights how their payment structure was settled. In other words, have the top partners already paid and the OCOG partners already paid, and did they keep that money for a year or they give it back? I don't know what's happening in that regard. I think it's probably an imposition for them from a programming perspective. It's certainly an imposition that they've had teams in place now for many, many years, not just a few months, but years working in Tokyo. Comcast NBC is the only rights-holding broadcaster that creates its own feed. Everything else in any other country, when you watch the Olympic Games, you're looking at a pool feed from the Olympic Broadcasting Services. They do it all. NBC is the only rights-holding broadcaster that puts a camera right next to every one of OBS's cameras. That's how important these games are to NBC and how big their investment is. So that, I'm sure, is a cost to change all that and move it 12 months ahead and take all that labor and all that infrastructure that you had planned for this summer, move it next summer. But everybody's having to get along here and make this work. It's really about flexibility and creativity. Even the sponsor agreements, and I'm working, I work for a top partner and I'm negotiating, they're a brand new top partner. I'm negotiating the agreement right now, not me, but my team, our team. And it's unprecedented. So there isn't a book, there's not a precedent, there's no way to look at how was this done before. You just got to be extremely flexible, creative, and understand that this is not really anyone's fault. And I think we'll get through it. God willing, if there's a vaccine sometime in the next 10 months or so.
I want to close by asking you something on a more positive note. What's your favorite piece of Olympic swag that you have?
My Olympic torches. Maybe you can see a couple back there behind me. I'm not sure how wide this shot is, but my favorite one is the Atlanta torch. It was the first games that I worked as a part of the IOC marketing staff. I was actually part of Delta Airlines and ran the Delta program for 3 years during the Atlanta Games, and I got to run with the torch. I got to run with it because I was a sponsor, so I felt a little sheepish about it. But it was one of the most important and magnificent things I've ever done in my life, was to hold that flame that was lighted in grease, and or is it lit or lighted, and got to run with that torch.
I'm going to ask you to get up and show it to us, because now I got to see it.
You want to see it?
Yeah.
God, I love this torch because it's the last torch that looked like a torch.
It also looks a little Star Wars-ish.
Well, this is Greek olive wood here. These are made to look like olive thongs, I guess. And the torches today look like space shuttles. I mean, they're huge and they're very modern. This may be in the last torch that looked remotely like
a torch, as you said.
Yeah. You carry that thing for half a kilometer. You don't think it's heavy, but you're so excited and your adrenaline's flying. And it was a wonderful opportunity to reconnect with the Olympics. And that's when I kind of made the decision to do this for the rest of my life, to stay with the Olympics.
That's a beautiful thing there that you got, and a great testament to all the work you've done on these games that America loves, the world loves, and we're sorry, obviously, that they're delayed, but looking forward to next year. Terrence Burns, expert on all things Olympic, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
I'm Mark Halperin. Thanks for watching Wide World of News. We'll see you again soon, right here, same bad time, same bad channel.